Welcome everyone to another episode of the Marketing Measurement Matters live podcast, and also welcome Sundar. So good to hear you here. I have seen a LinkedIn post of you, which was it had a pretty incredible statement: 35 million in ad spend saved at Uber. We're going to dive into the details of that, but very warm welcome to the show, and of course also to Dr. Tim Wiegels, one of our co-hosts. Most of you know him all. But to maybe start off, Sundar, can you give us a quick introduction of what you've been up to in the past, what you're currently doing, and then we dive into the specifics of this amazing case.
Yeah, well, first off, thank you for having me. You have a very professional setup, so I know this is very legit. This is a very legit setup. So again, thank you for having me. I started my career interestingly I went to school for finance, but graduated in 2009, which is a terrible year to graduate in finance. Yeah. So I actually became a software developer, didn't love that. Then went back into finance, didn't love that. And then finally got into marketing analytics, marketing data science, and spent over a decade in that. Most of my time was at Uber. And so I joined, really focused on like life cycle marketing analytics. Then I moved on to performance marketing analytics. And then when I left, I was their global head of brand data science. So how do you measure and improve the ROI of $1 billion brand budget? That was, I left Uber in 2021, went to a few startups, didn't work out so well. And then I've been consulting for the past 2 years, but decided, put a pause on that. And now I'm just focused on a newsletter and a podcast as well. So very cool to be on another podcast. I know how much work goes into these things.
Yeah. Maybe you mentioned that you have a financial educational background. Did that help a bit into getting into the marketing analytics side of things? This financial thinking. I mean, the saying goes like, if you want to ask for marketing budget, a lot of times you have to also convince the CFO or the financial people.
Mainly the CFO.
Mainly the CFO. Yeah. Yeah, it's a great question. So not only did I have a degree in finance, I ended up getting my CFA, so passed like all 3 levels, and then just decided not to go into finance. But the interesting thing was not the finance as much as just really enjoying the analytics behind it. So when I converted into marketing data science, I actually had a friend who was like, "Hey, I'm looking for an analyst. Do you know anybody?" And I said, "Well, I'm analytical. I don't know the business as much. I don't know digital marketing, but let me just go take a leap. I'll figure it out." And so I think what was really more of the driver on the finance was less the terms, right? Because you're not really using, other than ROI, there's not too many terms that the CFO cares about. And so everything was with stocks and options, all of that didn't really come to play. I think it was just more that I was quantitatively inclined and just curious about numbers, which got me into finance. And maybe just additional context too is in college, I did a minor in computational finance. So like, how do you understand theories about like options pricing and Black-Scholes model? So again, it was very like quantitative, but it was because I was curious. So not so much that I used all of it, but just, I think just having that mindset helped me.
Yeah, being good with numbers, I think we all realize this is quite helpful if you work with anything marketing-wise.
Yeah, it can be quite an advantage.
Yeah, and I think you guys probably know this. You're not in the middle of a day using calculus. It's like, can you do back of the envelope calculations? Can you put together some patterns that you like quickly understand? And so weirdly, it's more about like a lot with like stock market. Do you understand the risk to reward, right? So that's more of what I think matters, especially in marketing data science, than necessarily like super deep quant understanding.
Yeah, that's good. We just had a sales call yesterday with a rather well-known chocolate manufacturer, and the guy was a marketing analytics person, and he was working amongst others at Zalando. And he said what he has done in the past a lot was bastardized data science, and I like that term. That's the streetwise data science. Not knowing the ins and outs of every single LSTM algorithm or whatever, but this sort of standard quantitative background is, I think, really helpful. When you done and just out of interest, before we get to the main object, so to say, when you've done this really complex stuff on options pricing, etc., where you be using any sort of standard analytical tool or
methods,
R, for example, or Python, or was it all more in Excel?
So when I was doing this in university, it was a bit of R. But it was really more theoretical, which I thought was kind of cool. Like we understood, just again the different type of calculus behind it, and just like how to theoretically price options. But something I am a big thing on now is I generally do believe with just SQL and Google Sheets, you should be able to do 95% of your job. So I learned a bit of R, but just to make myself faster. I can't say I ever got super complex, and so. Still something I'm like big on when I see analysts get like a new certification in Python. I'm like, great, but that's not really like what the skill set is about.
No.
So, and so I think every marketing data science or even data science leader goes through this of like, please stop, learning another skills, like quantitative skill set. Like you got to learn to communicate better. So yeah, I'm a big advocate of, I just still to this day know Google Sheets and SQL really well. I can do a bit of R, but I actually never learned Python.
Yeah, but to be honest, I mean, if you can do Google Sheets and SQL nowadays, the rest, I'm going to say something very bad. The rest, ChatGPT and Julius and all the AIs are very, very, very good on, right? I mean, I still like to put my own Python code into the shell, but that's mainly written also by ChatGPT because it's faster than to put it on my computer. But I mean, yeah, that's totally right. I mean, if you get these two things right, you know what you want the machine to do, right? You don't need to know the Python code. You just need to be able to communicate it properly.
Yeah, and Tim, I think you're spot on, which is so many times the challenge is knowing what to do, not how to do it.
Yeah.
Right? And it's usually, like in general, I feel like you've already lost the analysis before you start because you go into it blind and then you spend up 2 weeks. And then by the time 2 weeks is gone, most companies that we work at are like, well, too late. We don't care. Move on.
or don't exist anymore, right? I mean, it's too fast.
Yeah, exactly.
So when did you first get in touch with measurement and, incrementality testing, marketing mix modeling? Was that at Uber or did this come a bit earlier?
Yeah, that was at Uber. So my first exposure was more towards promotion-based A/B testing. So we were, very competitive with Lyft. And so at the time we were deploying, hundreds of thousands of dollars of budgets every week. And so just A/B testing different promo strategies, pricing strategies, et cetera, started there. And then once I got into leading performance marketing, a bit more of like classic incrementality testing in like the channel level. And then when I led global brand data science, I mean, just the type of campaigns you're running, you have to do longer term geo holdouts. You then have to bring in MMMs. And I've actually still never built an MMM. I just worked with super talented data scientists that, or I think Orbit is Uber's data science package for MMMs, but like they've got like
the open source package,
yeah, they've got a world class. So I was not smart enough to build that, but
use it.
But yeah, exactly. You use it and you learn how to triangulate, and so it evolved. So to answer your question, it all started at Uber, but it happened in different phases.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then I guess so we always like to talk about triangulation, where also the one of the missing parts that we haven't discussed yet is the multi-touch attribution. Was there anything of that done at Uber as well?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, multi-touch was huge because we were predominantly click-based for a long time with performance marketing. Eventually, and part of the things we'll get into is that we were so saturated we would roll off certain channels, but multi-touch was big, and we actually had a VP of performance marketing come over from TripAdvisor, who again very classic, really big digital SEO focused. And so MTA was a part of it. But while I was on performance marketing in the US, I don't even think we had started to build MTA. So this is in 2018, 2019. We didn't start to build MTA yet. And we still used last click, like paid plus organic, like just blended, like just keep it easy. So, so I've it's funny. I've had the whole range of super sophisticated multi-touch to, yep, every week we just make decisions on paid plus organic blended. so yeah.
Yeah, maybe let's dive a bit into the 35 case. I think that's a really interesting one. Again, that's how I got to know you and connected on LinkedIn. Thanks again for the swift response. Also, full disclosure, you talked about this already on 4 other podcasts, which is completely fine.
People want to hear about that. That's
I think it's an interesting story. No, I mean, I think what's not that many businesses talk about that, and also not that many businesses do incrementality tests, as far as we experience here over in Europe, at least. So I think it's great. First of all, great that you talk about it, and then of course, we like to learn more about it. How you? I read your LinkedIn post and understood it, and also the other. I think it was on Medium. Was it on Medium, the post that you've done, or was it a LinkedIn?
Beehive newsletter, my newsletter. Same thing.
Okay.
Yeah, same thing. Yeah.
We can put that in the show notes, of course. But there was a bit more detail on it, but obviously, be great to hear about it from you personally.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think first to start up with, even though this is my 5th or 6th time, every single time I've been asked to draw out more of the story. So I actually think your audience is going to get the most complete version. I think
the most refined one.
No, not refined. Actually, the reason I had to do that is, and we couldn't even get into this, is that post that I had went crazy. And I think we kind of talked about it a bit. Like, I mean, it had over 3 million impressions, but what that does is it draws out the flip side of people saying, hey, there's not enough context. Like, this decision doesn't make sense. Like, it doesn't have all the detail, which is extremely annoying. But regardless, it's actually cool because I get a bigger opportunity to talk about it. So I think what's best is to start off with the context of where Uber was for why we even led this decision, right? So before this $35 million, I didn't realize this, but now as I've gone and looked at more Uber stories, Uber had fallen to $100 million ad fraud in like 2017, 2018. And basically, I'm actually going to post about this soon. It was one of the craziest, and I think one of the largest ad fraud cases in the history of marketing. But they took their advertiser to court. Like, it was $100 million lost. And so they started to really beef up data science at the beginning of 2018. Like, all of my people that I've worked with, a lot of the time, if you look on LinkedIn, start to come in around late 2017, early 2018. So going into that context, like, I had just been put on as the US and Canada rider acquisition performance analytics lead. And that's a lot. And it does matter in that it was just focused for US, Canada, just on rider acquisition and just on performance marketing channels, right? So the classic Meta, Snapchat, we were doing a bunch of things, affiliates, etc. So every week, right, you go in.
Sorry for interrupting, because these 100 million also sound quite impressive. Yeah. Can you maybe talk a bit about that? How what happened there? You don't need to name any particular ad platforms or whatever.
Yeah, I can imagine who it was, because we had similar stuff at Good Game Studios 1 or 2 years ago. Before that, but I mean, for me, it's also interesting. How did you find that out? What was the method? Because it's
Yeah, so this is, again, really crazy story, and I think it's even crazier than the 35 million. But so the 100 million, what happened was at the beginning of 2017, Uber had just a pretty shit year from a perception perspective, right? So their founder, CEO, Travis Kalanick, there's been like a few incidences. Trump, I think, had just won, and at least internally, Uber's position was, listen, if Trump is already in the presidency, it's like better to be on the inside and try to steer policy and try to help navigate that instead of just dismissing it, because you can't avoid the president of the United States. And so he joined their council of I think tech, or there's other tech leaders, and just Uber got a lot of backlash. And so as part of that, this investigator had said hey, look, your ad is on Breitbart, which is a really right-wing conservative, terrible place to advertise if you're an advertiser. But Uber had those blacklist policies in place, right? Mm-hmm. So they had already said no, we don't want to be advertising on Breitbart. So so the CMO at the time says, okay, well, I can't figure out where this is coming from. So he just keeps cutting a bunch of ad partners, and he just keeps cutting and keeps cutting. And all of a sudden, before he knew it, we had $150 million budget for the year. He cut $100 million before stuff started to move.
Wow.
And this is in 2017. And also you can imagine Uber at the time was under so much crap for being unprofitable. and like it could have really used the 100 million.
I mean, but that's an even better incrementality test, right? Just cut it and, well, see what happens in the next week.
Just cut, see what happens. And then they finally discovered, that their publisher had just been basically bots and just like click fraud. And so they took him to court. They actually won. The compensation was not close to what they lost, but the point is after that, so leading into end of 2017, early 2018, they start to bring in data science and they really go, crap, we need a lot more robust measurement. And someone should have been on this podcast telling them, hey, marketing measurement matters because it was clearly quite important.
Yeah, that's actually what we did back at Good Game Studios, and we also built this at Free Now and built this into other companies. One very important measure for your marketing campaigns to understand stuff like click fraud is not just the conversion or the install, but do people get active? I mean, obviously cat and dog game, because afterwards the click farm started to play until level 3 in the Good Game games and level 5 and so on. But I think, it's exactly the same. We also had a lot of data scientists on this thing because you need to find that out. And then you have to join this data science stuff with the marketing attribution.
Yeah. I mean, in the mobility sector, that's probably easier because bots don't get into actually writing a but still, I mean, you still have to have these measures because the bots are still downloading the app. So this click fraud happens in exactly the same way. Crazy.
Yeah, and this is actually one of the challenges where I think growth, especially when you're hyper growth, just sort of sweeps everything under the rug, and everyone's like, look, the numbers look great, and nobody ever asked to verify.
5 million downloads, awesome. 10 people do a ride.
Yeah, and you still get, because it's Uber or Free Now, you still get enough organic conversion that the blended still looks good, right? It still looks good enough, and so that's always the challenge. But that's the context that goes into 2018. Is I then joined US and Canada performance marketing, and we're looking at for Q1 of 2018, we're spending the same amount. We're spending a couple $100K a week, but our cost per acquisition is just going down. So this is good, right? Because it's January to March, seasonality wise, you come out of the lowest peak of seasonality or lowest trough of seasonality for Uber. Like you hit New Year's, January is cold, and then it starts to get better. Oh. So when the rides go up, right, when the signups go up, spend is flat, your CAC looks great. Now, all of a sudden, after March, and St. Patrick's Day in the US is a big day, so that's like sort of the peak. And then you have a little bit of a dip in Q2 going into the summer. Then all of a sudden, your CAC starts to spike because spend is still flat, but your signups go down. Mm-hmm. And these are not like, I think when you've got pretty consistent spend and you're a generally well-oiled machine, your CAC should not be swinging 5, 10, 15% in a week. I mean, right? Like you're not doing optimization. 2, the algorithms themselves, unless you've turned it off and turned it back on, are not capable of doing that. So then all of a sudden people are just like, what is going on? And of course, as the analyst, people are like, hey, like take some time to step away and look at it. And very quickly, like the funny part is the analysis is not that hard. And Tim, you've probably got a lot of stories like this where you just take a step back and go, okay, well, what am I going to look at? Well, let me look at seasonality first. And you just overlay 2018 versus 2017, and it is just the same pattern. Like it is the exact same curve shifted up because 2018 had more growth. Then you go, okay, well, let me check spend. And then you look back, and spend is like, spend obviously has some volatility, but not enough to compensate for this. And then the added part to all this, which I forgot to frame up, was a side project that I was asked to work on, was what was the saturation of our rider sign-up penetration in the US. Mm-hmm. So of the total 350 million population, of course, narrow that down to who we are actually targeting, how many of those percents, what percent are we actually saturated? And unsurprisingly, in 2018, all of our core urban centers are at virtually 100%. Yeah. I mean, like 1, from a brand awareness perspective, we're insanely high. 2, from a use case perspective, there's only 2 reasons you don't use us. well, you got your own car, or you hate us and you like Lyft better. That was it, right? Like you just brand wise didn't want to associate with Uber, which it is what it is. That's part of why I think brand data science is very interesting too. But the point was, at that point, we had already acquired SignupWise, and I had done this separately. And that's crazy because it was just this like perfect storm of like, where I'm like, wait, or highly saturated, wait, this is like virtually looks non-incremental. Because at least like when I say that like non-incremental, like just from a chart perspective, I mean, the CAC was basically 1-to-1 with what was the pattern of signups, right? So there's not even like an adjustment for spend that you have to offset. You combine these two together, and this next part is where I give a lot of props, and where I think the best of the best companies do this, and that's what separates them. Is I brought this data, a total of like 8 to 10 slides, to my manager, and who was then my skip level, who was head of all of marketing data science, and they go, yeah, pretty clear, pretty intuitive. Like, we got to go run an incrementality test, run it by the CMO at the time, and it was like a no-brainer. Just great, go run a 3-month incrementality test. And I think the like feeling from the ad fraud just made it even more easy for me to go, hey, we got to do this, and no backlash. So we ran it first off, and this is where people have asked me, and I don't remember the details because Facebook does have a decent enough conversion lift study that you can run a 3-month incrementality test. So I don't remember if it was a Facebook conversion lift study or a geo test, but regardless, you're getting the same answer, which is Facebook is virtually non-incremental. And this is where the triangulation is awesome, because when we were doing this after, we also then had just started to build up the MMM, because again, first couple months, we bring in people, we want to do the MMM, and it validates it. And I think what ended up being the number from the MMM was like, paid is low single digit % incremental. So like everything triangulates, everything comes together, 3 months. And then we said, pretty no brainer, right? Like turn off Meta for US and Canada, performance marketing only. So this is not upper funnel brand awareness. This is
social ongoing.
Yeah, just evergreen performance marketing on something like Instagram, which on Meta, which was of course our biggest channel at the time, and doesn't touch Google. We actually ran a separate incrementality test for UAC, but that's what happened, and we did it. Not a single ounce of pushback. Hey, this is what the data says. We got to go do it. So very cool to be able to pull that off, because I think a lot of people stumble at that part of, well, it's a lot of risk for the business.
Convincing people. I think this is where we're really lucky, because I think the biggest problem is really to convince people that this is an issue and that people listen to you. And I mean, at companies like Uber or mobility or gaming, that's easier. But I think if you would do this...
Because you have more quantitative inclined people? Or
you have people that understand numbers and want to understand it. And I mean, or like I said at Good Game Studios, the product is shit. We have to do something with numbers. That's quite often the case. But I think in 80% of the companies, especially your step from finding this to convincing someone would have been way more difficult. That's sadly the case.
I totally agree. And I think e-commerce has this challenge a lot. A lot of retail has this a lot. And so part of it is also that we were a tech company. Like you said, I think gaming and mobility naturally have data-driven founders. And at the end of the day, if your founder doesn't have that culture, you're screwed. I mean, it's almost impossible to push it through. But sorry, Jonas, I cut you off.
No, amazing case. I was just...
That's really interesting. I like that.
Yeah. No, really. I mean, where did you reinvest the money then, the 35 million? And because also coming back to the 100, I just wanted to say something with regards to the 100 million fraud case, because sometimes, and I'm not talking about Uber, but sometimes maybe other high invested startups or scale-ups, they have the budget with their VCs and their investors, and if you suddenly don't know where to invest another 100 million,
then you have an issue because
then you have an issue. It's not always, because you mentioned it maybe it doesn't become that obvious if you're growing and scaling anyhow, that suddenly you have money lying around and you don't have a plan where to invest it.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that's it sounds like a non-issue, but it can be an issue because suddenly the CMO doesn't know. Okay, I have had this marketing plan. What I do now with 100 billion.
No, I think it's a really great call out. I actually call it out in my newsletter, which was so many times, like there's a CMO like being like, "Oh, we have to give this money back," and I think it's like such a stupid way to think about it. Like, of course, yeah.
What else?
It improves the P&L.
Yeah, it improves it. But actually, funny enough, it often comes from finance of like use it or lose it. I'm like, what kind of stewardship is this? Like, this makes no sense. Like, why would you not?
To be honest, we as a SaaS business, we have seen this before, like with clients, suddenly end of the year, there's some use it or lose it budget, but I think it's ridiculous.
So where do we spend it next? So like one, right, the good thing is Uber had no shortage of opportunities to go invest.
That's true.
Right. So 2018, Uber Eats starts picking up. So you naturally absolutely want to shift that to that high growth initiative. And again, the cool thing is you have the same demographic on rider that you want to convert to eaters, right? So you naturally transition it there. To every marketplace, in my experience, is almost always, especially mobility, is always undersaturated on the supply side.
Yeah,
right.
100%. Wow,
it is impossible to get as much supply as you need, so you naturally reinvest it there, right? So then,
meaning acquiring more drivers.
Getting more drivers in, getting a lot more drivers, because the problem is drivers are very volatile, especially in stuff like taxi drivers are different, but something which is like PHV, so private hire vehicle, like Uber and Free now is doing, that's always going up and down. So it's always important to push there.
Okay.
We were also shit at that.
Also to add one more thing too, right? When you first have these, whether it's taxi cabs or PHVs, when they first join Uber, say in like early 2010, 2012, these are all full-time drivers. Like this is what they enjoy doing.
Yeah.
So the quality of drivers over time, quality not in terms of quality of person, but quality of how much they contribute to the network, always goes down, because if you lose a driver that you acquired from 2010, it takes like you have to acquire 4 drivers to replace that number of output. Right?
And that's not because they're bad, because they just do a quarter of the time driving, because they do it next to their job.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So it's like, the classic adoption curve also applies to the supply side of a ride sharing market, where you have early adopters who are like, this is great. Then over time, you have the people that only want to do it 5-10 hours a week. And so you replace almost like 5-6 times. So you have to spend more there, right? So you can shift the budget to driver side acquisition. You can shift it to Uber Eats acquisition. And then we of course had different markets. So we had Latin America still required a lot of rider side acquisition. EMEA still, APAC. I mean, literally the rest of the world did not have the same level of saturation and brand awareness.
So it was bad for me what you did. Well, good.
Yeah, sorry.
We're competing there to some degree.
Exactly. Latin America and EMEA, 100%. But and to be honest, we felt this in 2018 and 2019 that something changed on that side, right? I mean, that's also interesting in the end.
Yeah,
there was no budget for interesting.
Wait, Tim, sorry, do you mind? I'm sorry.
No.
What happened? What were you feeling?
I mean, the thing is, I came in with a friend of mine who's now the CEO in 2018, and we immediately started to change something about the vouchering and stuff, right? To actually get better people in, because we also realized the competitors are rising up, right? Because Free Now, My Taxi was founded in 2009, and similar to Uber, I mean, it's the same year actually, funnily, but for the first 6 to 7, 8, 9, 10 years, we were on our own. So it was perfect. The thing just rose, growth. And at some point, Uber came more in the European market. We also had another venture in Latin America. And I think maybe it's not 2018, but in the late 2010s, you really realized the competitor stuff really rises up. And then we really had to start to look into this and check how you guys are spending your money, how much your prices are, which I think everyone did. So there were interesting times to understand how do we actually, is there a possibility for this to be a market for 2, 3, 4 mobility partners? And I think we all said every country works with 2 mobility providers, not with more. I think 3 is a crowd that doesn't work. And that was
same thing in there at Uber, or what was it?
That was the exact same strategy. So everywhere we've divested, we have either said we have a path to becoming 1, or like we can steady 2. So India, it's Ola and us. In China, like you're just not competing. There's only 1. No. So get out. Forget it. And then everywhere else, like, I mean, generally in every market, we are 1 or 2 or we've left. And this is also true on the delivery side.
Yeah. Totally similar. I mean, delivery mobility, there's not a big difference.
Yeah, it's not a big difference. I mean, it's also the same. It's the same supply side as well. It's the same couriers, drivers, generally.
Yeah.
So there's a max there.
The bad gig economy, but I mean that's it.
Yeah.
I'm just looking at time. Are we already?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, to be honest, I would love to talk to you. I mean, there's another very interesting topic we just scraped. When do we have to move from acquisition to retention and really focus on this? Because I mean, the saturation stuff is something that's
rider, or are you talking about rider or driver?
Generally B2C.
Okay.
And generally any kind of business that's getting older than 5-6 years. Growth is at some. I mean, Freenow at some point had 2.5 million downloads in Ireland, and we were like, yeah, maybe we should stop acquisition campaigns because it's stupid. And I mean, obviously, the other question I have to ask you, because we have very similar backgrounds, how does it come that when you work in mobility and marketing data for some time, you become a freelancer at some point? Because I have another friend, I have me, I have you. That seems to be there is a pattern. I can see that.
Well, I'll answer that one first because we'll go back to the shifting to retention. I think we can speak a lot about that. So I think on the consulting side, what's interesting is there's very few places where I think you're able to actually get quite deep across the entire marketing funnel and at hyper growth. And to be fair, like people look at our resumes and they go, oh, cool, you probably worked on something interesting. Like even if, I mean, Tim, I know you're also like super high up, so you probably did, but even if I didn't, they just look at Uber and they go, oh, you must have a lot of interesting stories. So still to this day, like I wrote about, this LinkedIn post that I talked about was from 2018, still the biggest post I've ever had. So like, there's still this, like, no matter what, you sometimes perceive that your experience isn't as good, but people still want to hear and care about what did you do at a Freenow? What did you do at an Uber? What did you do at a DoorDash? So, but it also comes back to these were the hypergrowth and consumer right now is not super big. It's all B2B SaaS. So when you look at where all these big consumer companies came from, of course, there's the Facebooks and the social media. But outside of that, you've got Netflix, Spotify, and a bunch of really cool delivery mobility platforms.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the most interesting people that have been in these crazy, what I'll call war times in the past 5 to 10 years in consumer are all from these, gaming, mobility, delivery type services. So I think it just naturally becomes, and we've had to deal with a lot of data because a lot of the founders were really data driven. So the data quality at Uber was insane, like just top, like, I think that's part of the reason I struggled to find something else after is because I go into it, I'm like,
but that's it. That's it. That's the other thing I wanted to go at.
The same pain there? Or?
Yeah, it becomes boring, right? I mean, the thing is like, you are used to solving things very quickly with a lot of data, with a lot of good data, but you don't find this. And I mean, even I would even say coming from gaming to mobility, there was a step down. And I think for me to be happy at my job is the only way to do several different things and not work with one problem the whole time.
Yeah, and one more is the quality of the people.
Yeah,
right?
100% as well.
I think it's the same across any of these consumer stores. If you talk to them, like the people were just insanely high caliber, and it's a lot of it is not technical. It's just like an insane level of curiosity that I've yet to be able to find.
Hungry, they're hungry. The mindset is right.
They're hungry. They're so hungry. They're so curious, and they had to. Like in a way, like these companies knew that they could also bring the best of the best. So you had to bring your best, and so. Part of it is it's hard. It leads to a lot of burnout. But on the flip side, if you get through it, you come out really quite strong. So cool.
It's funny that you mentioned it now that just because when you were talking about it, I was thinking about our customers. Of course, I need to be careful with that. But
don't say anything.
No. I mean, some of the like the Volts and also you Freenow.
Yeah.
Those are some of the very most challenging clients who also want to really know what's going on. I mean, they're not satisfied with us just telling them, well, trust the black box and the measurement magic.
I mean, it's the same. Your first big customer was also mobility in some way, right? It's,
we have Flix Mobility, they were Greyhound Bus. They were the most challenging ones and determined our product development to some degree. So, it makes a whole lot of sense, but not disregarding all our other.
But there's a difference.
Yeah. We would question. So I was going to say we would question vendors a lot. We would go as deep as like talk to your data science. And we've had so many agencies go. No one else has asked us.
Same. I had discussions with App Annie back in the day, data AI now, and AppsFlyer. They were always like, "Why do you want to do that?" I was like, "Because of this and this." Oh, we never done this. Nice. Let's put this in our. But this is really where it bakes, where it's fun. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry,
cool.
we are totally over time.
We always try to reduce it to 30 minutes. We had 35 minutes now. And us being Germans, we'd like to keep it punctual.
But this means we have to do that again.
Yeah, we should do it again because we have so many more questions that we would like to discuss. And maybe we can get you back on the show in a couple of weeks or whatever. It was really great chatting with you. Thanks so much for the insights. Amazingly interesting. And I can also feel Tim Wiegels was really into it because of the mobility aspect of things. So
Tim, we're gonna have to chat separately.
Yeah, let's do that. 100%. I mean,
but
if you have a podcast, let's do that as well.
Yeah, definitely. Sundar, again, thanks so much for being on the podcast. Tim Wiegels, of course, also thanks to you. And then until next time, hopefully. And to the audience, please switch on for the next episodes. And subscribe to our channels wherever you find them. Thanks for being here.
Yes, thank you both.
Bye-bye.
Bye.